Oh, the mic is on. We love that. Hello, everyone. Okay. Perfect. I was going to say, I can't see you because there is a very, very large bright light like right about here that is obstructing everything that I can see. But I'm so excited to be here back again at React Miami. It is one of my absolute favorite conferences, one that I will not skip every single year. So I'm happy to have y'all here with me today, and welcome to Code But Make It Cute. Now, if you've seen me speak before, you probably noticed this theme that I have of either wanting to make things cute, wanting to do things like code for the senses or make things purple. It's just one of my things. I can do things, but they gotta be cute. They have to be a little bit purple. Okay, so perfect. So we are here in Miami, and one of my favorite parts about traveling is the food. Has everybody had food that they have liked so far? I saw the barbecue earlier, and I'm so upset that I didn't get to have any just because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't gonna get a little bit too nauseous here on stage. But has everybody been enjoying what they're eating? Okay, that's what I thought. Food is usually an equalizer because we all love food, at least a little bit, right? Well, let's think for one quick second. This is your basic chicken, broccoli, and rice. How many people go to the gym a lot or do the meal prep thing? Okay, I do see some hands. I'm so sorry. I do also like the gym, but I cannot do the chicken, rice, and broccoli. The thing is, it gets its job done. You've probably had this 100 times. It's very good on the macros. It has exactly what your body needs. It's giving you the fuel that you need to move forward, but it just doesn't do anything for me. And this one specifically doesn't look like it has a speck of seasoning there. So I eat it. I'm full. Great. I'm not hungry anymore. But now I just feel kind of sad. Like I didn't get any enjoyment out of eating that. So we can think about that and almost think about how we look at like user experiences. When was the last time you used something and you didn't really feel anything? Maybe it's a form that submits, or maybe it's a modal that does what it's supposed to do, or maybe it's just a button that changes colors on hover. Everything in the ticket that we were given is checked off, but something is missing, or unfortunately in this case, I think we got a little bit too many things going on right here. So either way, that feeling of something is missing or maybe something is a little bit too chaotic, if we feel it as developers about the interfaces that we're building, it's very likely that our users also feel the exact same thing, but on a different level and on a different scale. What happens is you usually see something like this, and maybe you close the tab or you just kind of put that away and you're like, okay, never gonna do that again, that's okay. But I think these are things that we can easily fall into. So we've all had that feeling that we can't place. Maybe it's that the seasoning isn't on the food exactly how we expect it to be, or something like this where we have a UI and it works like it's supposed to, but it doesn't make you want to stay in the app. It doesn't feel good to use necessarily, even though it checks all the boxes. So what we're going to talk about today is that difference. We're going to talk about the difference between a UI that works and a UI that makes you feel a little pizzazz of something. Because I think that that gap between functional and feeling is actually one of the most interesting spaces in engineering, because we get to use all of our fun human fundamentals about things like psychology and how we use and interact with technology. So by the end of our very quick time together, hopefully we're going to look at our components that we're building and not just simply ask, okay, do they work? Do they hit all the checkboxes? But more importantly, we're going to start wanting to ask ourselves, how does it feel and how does it feel for our users? So we are first going to do this by taking a look at a very quick psychology on the human lessons of delight, because it's actually functional and very deeply neurological. And then we're going to look at a tool that can help us be a lot more precise with the animations and motion that we want to add in. And then lastly, I'm going to show a really quick demo of two components that you probably see and interact with every single day, and understand how they can go from feeling flat to feeling a little bit more emotional. So let's start with the question of why. Why does this matter? We can make code cute, we can add motion and animation. The thing is, it's really communication, and communication as developers is our job. So here's the thing about delight. It's not just a little cherry on top, or it's not something that is a nice to have per se. When a user hits your UI and they are surprised in a really good way, we know that our brains release a little bit of dopamine. That dopamine and psychology of keeping people in applications is exactly what your favorite apps are doing every single day to keep you in there. Maybe some apps are doing it a little bit too much because maybe one of us in the room scrolls TikTok a little bit too much. But that's okay, because we listen and we don't judge. But that's exactly what's happening, right? So this is memory. We're creating memories and a feeling of wanting to come back for more and experience more. So it's things that make our brains actually feel good. And I think that they show up in a variety of different ways for us as developers, but I'm going to talk about 3 here today. The first one is going to be what happens in really, really small moments. The second one is going to be what happens at the peaks, and then also how we can actually go through and build trust over time. So let's start with the very smallest moment, and that's going to be those little micro interactions. And we may not necessarily think about these as being moments of delight that we need to sprinkle around, but I know that we've all dealt with this. Maybe it's a little heart button that actually fills with a heart when you actually go through and click on it. Or maybe we are using a to-do list and it goes through and just checks off something. It's communication that our system is providing for our users to let them know that we heard them, that they can go on and do whatever other task it is, but that we are communicating that they are heard in their interaction. So even though this might be only a couple of extra lines, or maybe you're thinking, why do I even need this? This is the silent communication that almost acts as a promise that tells the user that the interaction did or did not work. The next thing is, so we have micro interactions, which are like our building blocks, but then we get to the peak end rule. And this is something that I think is increasingly fascinating as I'm looking at like designing different applications. So Daniel Kahneman figured out that people don't just judge an experience by the average of that entire experience. Who's gone to a restaurant and maybe your food was good, but maybe something happened with the dessert and it wasn't exactly how you wanted, or maybe you get the bill after ordering from a restaurant and realizing nothing had a price on the menu, and then your experience may be a little bit tainted after that. You kind of have a bad feeling in your mouth, even though the remainder of the meal was good. You may not necessarily be apt to come back for more because of that experience that happened toward the end. That's the peak end rule. It says that we basically judge an event by 2 things, an emotional high point and how it ended. So even though that steak was good, I'm not sure if it was worth $900. I'm not sure if I will exactly be back for that. And we can think about that in our apps as well. Apps like Duolingo know this, and they do it very, very well. You may have gotten every single answer wrong in your daily Duolingo, but the thing that's going to keep you coming back for more the next day is when Duolingo tells you that you're doing a good job and that you have a streak of over 1 year. You're like, okay, well, I can't break my streak. I got to keep going, even if I'm not getting the answers right. It's what keeps you coming back to those applications. So those moments of either onboarding, of letting users know that something has been completed, those moments of confirmation, that's where we should really be spending a little bit more time in animations and making delightful experiences. So we are creating those peaks, we have the micro interactions, but something much bigger is happening when those things happen, and it's that we're building trust. Now, we see the one on the left-hand side, the payment screen, definitely looks like something we would have seen in, I don't know, the early 2000s. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I do judge when I see websites that look like this. I'm thinking, if I can't trust you to simply use an open source design system to build this form, why am I gonna trust you with my credit card number? That doesn't really sound like something that's smart for me to do. So that's when we get into realizing that building delightful experiences isn't just about making things cute or about making them fun or whimsical. It really goes into trust. Even though these 2 forms may have the same exact Stripe integration on the back end, and they may still very well be secure, it's very likely that the person who is like going through the checkout process, they might get to this and be like, whoa, that looks a little bit sketchy, and you may have lost a customer. So it goes a lot more into not just decoration, but also credibility. So feeling is functional, motion is communication, and then animation has to earn its place. It has to either be making something faster, making something cleaner, or making it more memorable. Otherwise, it is just noise that is distracting users from your applications. Okay, so we know that feeling matters, right? We want to go through, and let's say we want to go ahead and start adding those little moments of delight or those moments of like animation. Now we need precision. So once we want to go through and decide we want to add our little CSS animations, we want to add some things, maybe the first thing that we reach for is vanilla CSS, which is totally valid because I think that's where most of us start and where a lot of us live. The thing is, it's really good for things like hover, for things like fading in or fading out or really easy transitions, but what happens when you actually want to sequence things together? Or what happens when you want to sequence two things, but one of them has to wait on the other one to be completed? And then what if you want to actually do something with the scroll animation or scroll positioning? Suddenly, we're doing all of this weird delay animation math, and we're trying to figure out how to do things in JavaScript, and then we're toggling classes on and off, and then we're also hoping that it works in all of the browsers that we have to support. And it can be a mess and a lot to keep up at the top of your head. So that brings me to one of my favorite tools of these days, which is GSAP, or the Green Sock Animation Platform. And it is basically a high-performance JavaScript animation library that can animate anything inside of the DOM itself. So this is going to be your DOM elements, or your React components, or SVGs, or Canvas, WebGL. And it really actually works how we already think about React. It's composable, it's declarative, and it's predictable. So here's where the ceiling really comes in, especially when we think about CSS. The first one is going to be those complex sequences that I was talking about a couple of seconds ago. When you want to do things manually or like have an animation delay calculations, it can become really unmanageable really, really quickly. So GSAP helps us with this by offering a timeline API that sort of reads it out almost like choreography. And I really think about these sequences almost if I was going to do something like editing a video, if you will, where you have a single timeline and you can do things like cut or scrub to a certain place or make certain transitions and animations happen. The next thing is when it comes to dynamic values, native CSS is not the current best tool that we can use. So GSAP actually helps us with this and helps us animate anything to and from. And then we also get to scroll-driven animations where typically we would have to have something like an intersection observer set up for CSS, and that can be a lot of overhead. GSAP helps us with this with the scroll trigger plugin that's already handled natively. And then it's especially helpful when we think about accessibility and wanting to make sure that we are respecting our users' needs when it comes to reducing motion. So there are 3 different APIs that GSAP provides us that basically allow us to animate almost everything. It's going to be the to, which allows you to animate from the current state to a target. We have from, which animates from the defined state to the current. And then we also have from to, which allows you to control both ends. And this one is really handy when you want to make sure that you are guaranteeing a start state from something that might already be in motion. And with all of these, they take a target, things that you're already familiar with, whether it's a ref, a selector, or a DOM element, and then an object of properties, and then you basically just set a duration. These are things that we already know how to use as React developers, so there's not a lot of overhead on us needing to come up with new mental models or figure out exactly what to do. Here's the part where it gets a little bit interesting, and it's genuinely the timeline. So timelines is basically like a container for your animations itself. So you can tween and play different sequences, you can overlap them, almost like I was saying a couple of seconds ago about video editing or animation, if anybody has done video editing before, where you have a single timeline and you can have multiple things that are layered on top of each other to create different sequences of animation. You can pause, you can reverse, you can scrub through to a specific point, and this timeline becomes the animation, but it's only one thing that you have to control and reason about, not a multitude of different things. So this is a look of what the exact full pattern might exactly look like. So this is a use ref on an element. We are using the use layout effect to build the timeline, and then we are cleaning up our function to make sure that we don't have things like memory leaks. And then once we have this is our mental model for how we can think about the next part, which is going to be a really quick little demo. So we all, maybe not all, I hope we all love boba, at least a little bit. Boba is like one of my favorite little snacks, my little sweet treat every now and again. So I created a demo for a fictional site called Boba Club, which is a monthly subscription for boba. And in theory, everything works, but we're gonna look at 2 different components that you probably see and interact with every single day and figure out how we can go from having sort of like a flat animation or a flat platform to something that's a little bit more lively. So here we have a product card, something that we are very, very used to seeing every day. It's functional. The hover states change color. We can click add to cart. but we don't really see anything happen. This means that we either have to trust that it works, or all of a sudden you're gonna start getting emails saying, hey, I'm adding things to cart, but I actually can't see the things in my cart. This card is inert, and it's basically like our meal prep for UI components, because we can see things there that we might just put together. We have a button, we have our title, we have the image. Now, with the same exact data and the same exact component and the same exact React state, we can use something like the GSAP Quick 2 for the card tilt, and I hope you can see it. I know it's a little bit light on the background, but basically you can think about it as when you are moving the cursor in any direction, it kind of tilts and follows where your cursor is. And then, because we are making things cute after all, when you click Add to Cart, I want a little celebration to say, yay, we're getting boba next month. I love it. So let's take a look at how I was able to do those two things. So the first one for the card tilt, I was actually really excited about this because this is a very popular animation that I was seeing pop up online on just about any place that had cards, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is probably really, really complicated. And the thing is, it actually just took me just about 2 Quick 2 instances. So the first one is for the x-axis, and the second one is for the y-axis, and then what happens is when we are scrolling over or mousing over, we are calculating the position relative to the center of the card, and then normalizing it to a small degree, and then passing it to our second Quick 2. Now, because this is optimized for multiple updates, we don't have to worry about this running consistently or causing different memory issues inside of our apps itself. It just gets to be really, really smooth. And then in terms of the sparkle, this is something that we are actually animating in SVG when the user clicks on the button itself. We can actually add it to the DOM, and then immediately as soon as it hits the DOM, we are animating them on the GSAP timeline where we are scaling them up from 0, and then almost having a little bit of randomness to make sure and feel like it is dynamic when we are actually clicking on the button itself. Now let's take a look at a modal, which is something that I know we also probably deal with and see every day. So this is something that we've probably seen 1,000 different times. You click on a button and you're like, oh, I didn't know that you were coming. It kind of just, it's a jump scare a little bit. You're not sure that the modal is gonna open, and then it just kind of pops open and the screen is a little bit different. It's a jump cut that doesn't have a lot of spatial context, and it kind of catches you off aware. You're not really sure where it came from, you're just sure that you clicked on something, and when you close it, you're not sure where it's going to close to. So even though this is something that might seem really, really small, small things that require us to increase our cognitive capacity really add up over time, especially in interactions like this. So when we take that same, oh, did it go back to the beginning? Okay, sorry for the flashing. Is that, where was I at? I was talking so much I forgot where we were. I think it's this one. Yeah, this one, perfect. So now we have that same interaction with our GSAP timeline, and this one feels a lot smoother. It nicely opens with the backdrop that fades in first, and then we draw our focus to the actual modal itself, and it signals that something is happening, and then the modal slightly scales back out and eases, and then when we actually close it, we'll notice that we're not doing anything too crazy. It's actually just reversing that same exact animation. So our one timeline is controlling this entire sequence. We have the backdrop first, which just slowly fades in with our GSAP 2, and then we have our modal, and then we are staggering in those children so we can see exactly where our focus should be. And then when we want to close the modal, we are simply reversing the animation, and that's it. I want to talk about a couple of things super quickly because I'm running a little bit low on time, but that's what happens when you yap a lot. In talking about GSAP and like, yes, we can do all these amazing things. We can animate every single thing in the DOM. There are a couple of things that are important for us to remember. The first one is performance. We want to make sure that we are tweening things that are on the composer thread, like transform and opacity, because things that are going to thrash the layout, things like the width or things like left and right, are going to cause the layout to look like they are moving, and it's not going to create a good user experience. The next thing is we want to make sure that we are actually cleaning up our functions themselves and the scroll triggers and the GSAP context, because we don't want to end up in a situation where we are animating unmounted components, because that's going to make your site slower. And then we also want to think about accessibility and making sure that we are providing routes and avenues for folks who don't want that motion in our sites. And in that same vein, we want to make sure that motion is not the only thing that is telling us that something has happened or that it is completed. We want to make sure that we are pairing it with a text confirmation. Okay, So remember this meal, it's fine, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. Technically, it's correct, but we didn't feel anything. That's exactly how we can think about our React components. We want to take them from the flat layouts that are functional and take them one step further to making experiences that feel good to our users, that communicate with them, that allow us to keep our promises. When they say that they are going to click on something or add to cart, we need to keep that promise and let them know that we have done it, or if we haven't, let them know that there has been an error so that they can try again. So if I had to boil this down to a couple of different principles, it would basically be 5. The first thing is we need to make sure that we are prioritizing performance and responsiveness. Delight that lags is not delight, and it is literally just friction, which is not fun. We also want to make sure that we are building for clarity and not just adding in animations because they're cute. We want to make sure that we're adding in animations that have a job, or that guide attention, or that confirm an action, or show different hierarchy. And also we want to make sure that we are using those micro interactions to keep our promises to our users and provide them with feedback. And then we also want to design for emotional moments. So those confirmation screens, the milestones, the end of the flow, that's where we can really start to spend a lot of our time in animation. And then lastly, I think it's good for us to sweat the small stuff sometimes, to start asking ourselves, what's something that's really small that can make this more delightful and a lot better for our users? Whether it's something like easing in a different curve, or maybe it's a duration, or getting very, very granular about what those animations look like. That's where the craft lives, and that's where engineering gets really interesting. So if I had to leave you with any thought, it's that even if you don't have the word designer in your title, or maybe you wouldn't consider yourself a designer per se, you don't have to wait on a Figma file for you to start creating experiences that are delightful. We are developers. We are allowed to feel passionate about making these delightful experiences. And most importantly, we are allowed to make them cute. Thank you. Ooh.